Good morning and welcome to the second plenary. My name is Dr. Mike Boyle and I lead the clinical trials team at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and I'm incredibly excited about today's plenary. I think when you see it, you will definitely be excited as well. Today we're going to focus on the topic of clinical research and clinical trials that are ongoing now, and talk about how those trials today that we're doing are going to lead to new therapies tomorrow. But before we do this, before we jump into our program, we're going to take just a few minutes to honor someone who's been particularly important to the CF community for over 3 decades. And we're also going to announce a new award in honor of this person. To introduce this person, the award and the awardee, I'd like to welcome to the stage the President and CEO of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, Dr. Preston Campbell.
Hey Mike, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us this morning. Hey, it is an honor both to recognize the awardee, who's done amazing work, but also the couple for whom this award is named. It's a special privilege to present a new award that recognizes a member of our community for distinction in leadership and commitment to the mental health and well-being of people with CF. Imagine that. It's about time. This award shines a spotlight on the significance of mental wellness to the overall health and well-being of those living with cystic fibrosis. The Carolyn and C. Richard Mattingly Leadership Mental Health Award is named in honor of 2 amazing people whose inspiring devotion to people living with CF has made a lasting difference in our community. Rich's work at the foundation began in 1978. He served as our Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President from 1993 to 2015. And it was my pleasure to work with Rich for 17 years, about a little less than half of the time of his stay at the CF Foundation. Rich, I know a lot of you know Rich. And those of you who do know that he had a singular and compassionate understanding of what the disease means in the day-to-day lives of people with CF, and a passion for finding new ways to support them. His emphasis on listening and learning from the CF community helped us gain a better understanding of the difficult toll this disease takes on an individual's social and emotional well-being, and on their families, and on their caregivers. Rich's wife, Carolyn, partnered with Rich for decades in the fight against cystic fibrosis and was deeply concerned about children and families who were battling the disease. When I say she partnered, Rich would get back from a trip at 3 in the morning and she would cook him breakfast or supper at 3 in the morning, whatever. She would pack his bags. I've told my wife that many times, and that's not going to go there, but she would pack Rich's bags before every trip. But Carolyn was really a remarkable person who also was a passionate advocate for a large number of issues outside of cystic fibrosis, including women's issues, female prisoners re-entering society, and understanding the emotional and mental health issues that would surround that transition. Tragically, Carolyn lost her life in September of 2014, and following her death, Rich and their daughter Kristen, who's with us today, and their family and friends established the Love You Project to continue her legacy of helping others and advance the understanding of and treatments for mental health issues in our broader community. This award pays tribute to Rich and Carolyn and their years of service by recognizing leadership in the promotion of emotional wellness throughout the CF community. I'd like for you all to welcome Rich and his daughter Kristen as they come to the stage. Please give them a big hand.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be home. I want to thank Preston, I want to thank Cam, and I want to thank the colleagues that I had the great pleasure of working with for so many years, which was truly a labor of love as we helped build the CF Foundation. Carolyn was a jewel. She was absolutely everything Preston said, and a partner that I was so blessed to have on a personal level and on a professional level. And I can tell you she's with us here today, and there are an awful lot of moms and dads in this room that she is thinking of and will forever be helping us fight CF. As you know, as Preston said, our journey took a little different path, but we've dedicated ourselves to mental health. And mental health, as I came to know in the time with the CF Foundation, is so vital to those in the CF world. But mental health touches us all, whether directly or indirectly. The Love You Project, I just wanted to share where that name came from. When Carolyn would sign her text messages to Kristen and I, and to friends and family, she'd always put LUV, love you, at the end. So when we lost her, it was very easy for us to say that we wanted to continue her goodness and bring to life a program to try to help others and to continue to do good. And we want to do that through advancing mental health. And what's about to happen here is incredibly important to us, and I'm incredibly grateful to the CF Foundation for doing so. I want to also promise that Kristen and I will fight CF till every last breath in our body is gone. Our greatest friends are the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and it's not a building, and despite the great academic and laboratories and all the things that the CF Foundation has, the alliances with industry and so forth, nothing is more precious than the human beings that made this organization what it is today, and will make it so much better in the next decade or two. So the greatest thing that could happen is the opportunity to say thank you and to recognize someone for their great work. And Preston, I thank you for the opportunity to do that, and we're awfully proud of what's about to happen. God love you all. You guys can stay up here, okay? You stay?
So I'm going to ask Rich and Kristen to stay because we're going to make this award, and I want them to be part of that. So now we get to change our focus from Carolyn and Rich, very deserving, to another deserving person who's made a difference in this space. The recipient of the inaugural Carolyn and C. Richard Mattingly Leadership in Mental Health Care Award is internationally recognized as an expert on depression and anxiety in people with CF. So that probably gives you a clue as where we're going. Her pioneering work has had an immeasurable influence on our community's understanding of the effects of chronic illness on a person's emotional wellness. She led investigations on the first international epidemiologic study of symptoms of depression and anxiety in the CF population. The TIDE study screened more than 6,000 individuals with CF, 4,000 caregivers in 9 countries. Imagine that. We're especially grateful for her leadership in the international group that developed the mental health guidelines that were published in 2015 and we use today. She is a key member of the Foundation's Mental Health Advisory Committee, which is focused on facilitating the implementation of these guidelines across our care center network. She was on the task force that recommended embedding mental health care into the standard of care and led our program to place mental health coordinators in centers. She's not just a stellar and prolific academic scientist and mentor to many. She's a tireless, caring advocate dedicated to making a difference in the lives of people with CF and their families. Her entire career embodies the Mattingly's incredible commitment and contributions to our community. For her many contributions, I would like to thank our inaugural awardee, Dr. Alexandra Quittner. So I'll give you a chance to clap one more time and stand up, but I want to thank her for all that she's done to change this disease and just state very clearly that we're thankful to have her on our team. For a long time, she was swimming upstream to make all of this great work happen. So Alexander, would you like to say something? Then we have a special award for you.
I'm incredibly honored to be the first recipient of the Carolyn and Richard Mattingly Award for Mental Health. I want to thank the Mattingly family and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for establishing this award. Recognizing the importance of both mental and physical health, treating the whole person is the key to improving health outcomes and quality of life. This initiative has taken more than a village. As Preston described, it has taken the hard work of providers in more than 9 countries, many of whom are in this room today. We screened depression and anxiety in over 6,000 adolescents and adults with CF and over 4,200 parents. And so I thank all of you. Next, we spent 2 years developing international guidelines for screening and treatment supported by the CFF and ECFS. And here we are today with mental health coordinators in 84 CF centers with another 50 to be funded next year. I never dreamed this could be possible. It has been an international effort, but there are a few remarkable people whose dedication has really made this happen. Professor Stuart Elborn, my dear friend and colleague who co-chaired the International Guidelines Committee. Dr. Beth Smith and Dr. Anna Georgiopoulos, who have provided leadership and guidance each step of the way. And finally, Dr. Bruce Marshall, who believed in this effort and has shepherded our group to the finish line. With the help of all of these people, we have really made this effort come to pass. To this dedicated and groundbreaking community, to which I have been a part for 28 years, I thank you.
Please stand and give Alexandra a hand.
All right, now we're going to move on to our second plenary, and as I said, get ready. It's going to be something special. All of us who were at the opening yesterday for the first plenary saw a video which sequentially went through the key CF milestones since 1955. It listed breakthrough after breakthrough and highlighted the increasing momentum of progress over the last several years. You know, as I watched that video, I have to say I actually felt a real surge of emotion. I was thinking about how much progress we've made, and I simultaneously felt this feeling of great pride in all that we've accomplished as a CF community, a great sense of hope for the future, and then really confidence that we're going to make it to the finish line. But I was also struck with the last section of the timeline. Does anybody remember what the last milestone was of the timeline, the 2016 milestone? It was actually over 50 clinical trials. All right, so to me that was the absolute perfect introduction to today's plenary, because while it came after this list of great breakthroughs that have been accomplished, that 50 clinical trials is more of a road sign pointing to the future of potential progress, more than reflecting on something that we've already accomplished. And that's exactly what this plenary is about. There's no doubt that this is the most exciting time for CF research. You can see that if you go to any session. What we're going to hear about today is exciting. We're going to hear about the next generation of CFTR modulators that have potential to transform CF and are not just a someday thing, but are actually starting the clinical trials this year. We're going to hear about other therapies and clinical trials that now have the potential to benefit everyone, no matter what genotype they have, and are ongoing in clinical trials now. But we're also going to hear about a great challenge. How are we possibly going to do 50 clinical trials, over 50 clinical trials this year, to determine which of these new therapies will be most effective? The answer is that we're going to do it together. The whole CF community, the worldwide CF community. And when I say community, I don't just mean doctors and nurses and research team members. I also mean the most important part of this community, people with CF and their families, who will be alongside us as partners as we continue to develop the new therapies that are going to transform CF. So today's plenary is going to reflect the CF community that we're talking about, that team effort. We will have a researcher from the US lead us off, and then a researcher from Europe, and then a nurse research coordinator, and then most importantly, 2 people with CF and a CF parent who are going to tell us about how we're going to accomplish this. Our first speaker will be Dr. Patrick Flume. Dr. Flume is a professor of medicine and pediatrics at the Medical University of South Carolina. He's the director of the Cystic Fibrosis Center there. Along with being known for his dedicated care of adults with CF, he's internationally known for his CF clinical trial work, which includes playing key roles in the development of several new CF therapies, including Kalydeco and Orkambi. Patrick will also act as the lead PI of one of the upcoming trials of the next generation of CFTR modulators, which is starting later this year. Our second speaker will be Dr. Kris De Boeck. Dr. De Boeck is also professor of pediatrics at the University of Leuven in Belgium, where she's the director of the pediatric pulmonary and infectious disease programs and also the director of the cystic fibrosis program. Kris is also known for her dedicated care for children with CF, but has also somewhere along the way found time to be the driving force behind the formation of the European Clinical Trials Network, which she has led for many years. She's also currently president of the European Cystic Fibrosis Society and has played an integral part in the development of several new CF therapies and led several international clinical trials. Our third speaker, Patty Burks, is the director of clinical trial affairs at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Prior to joining the CF Foundation, Patty served for many years as a CF research coordinator at the Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri. She now leads the National Research Coordinator Leadership Group for the CF Therapeutics Development Network. And I'll say that Patty has filled more than one role in the CF community. Long before she was ever a star research coordinator, she was a mom of a person with CF. And then for the most exciting part of the plenary, Patty will be joined live by 3 very special guests: Kristen Dunn from New Jersey, an adult living with CF, Brandon Earhart, an adult with CF from Michigan, and Elizabeth Bishop, a mother of 11-year-old twins with CF from Missouri, all of whom have participated in clinical trials. Patty will give you the full details on them when they join us. So please welcome our speakers to the stage for our second plenary session, which is entitled Clinical Research, a Worldwide CF Community Effort.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you. Thank you for those kind comments, Mike, but I thought I was talking about exacerbations. So our task is to talk about what we're doing, what we're going to do, and how we're going to do that. And I want to set the stage by just giving a little historical perspective. You will recall that in 1989, the CF gene was discovered. My career began in 1990 when I started my fellowship at the University of North Carolina. And I was impressed at an early CF meeting when Ron Crystal was at one of these same plenary sessions, and he talked about the potential of gene therapy. And he used as his analogy JFK's charge to get to the moon, that we were going to have a mission to the moon and it's going to take all these people to make it happen and we're going to get there. But here we are in 2016 and we don't have gene therapy. So that moon may still seem far away, but I'm going to argue that we have never been so close. I'm not going to spend time talking about the pathophysiology of lung disease. You all have seen this figure many, many times, and our previous approach to treatment, our current strategies, are usually dealing with the sequelae of CF lung disease. More recently, drug development has focused on the basic defect, and our new therapies are working on that basic defect. And the part I want to focus on, and that CF gene mutations leading to an abnormal airway surface liquid, really the way I want you to think about that is it's because of a reduction in overall CFTR activity, which is a function of both a decrease in the quantity and the function of CFTR. And that's what we want to try to fix. So when we think about the diagnosis of cystic fibrosis, we're all comfortable with understanding the sweat test, and we define a compatible result with CF as a sweat chloride concentration greater than 60 millimoles per liter, and less than that is either borderline or our healthy controls, normal subjects. But we can compare that to relative CFTR activity. There is a relationship between the sweat results and overall CFTR activity. And so when you look at those CF patients, the patients with a sweat chloride greater than 60, they have a very low level of CFTR activity. And those people who are unaffected have, much higher CFTR activity, such as even normal 100%. So I want to focus in on that abnormal and that relative CFTR activity. And what you can see in this cartoon is those patients who have severe mutations have very, very low levels of CFTR activity. Those with milder manifestations have a little bit more. But what you see in those who are otherwise healthy with no CF disease, they have a much, much higher CFTR activity. If we look carefully at those CF patients, 85% of our patients have 2 severe mutations and have very low levels, and 15% are a little bit milder. And if we cut that even a little bit further, I can begin to talk about those patients who are homozygous for delta F508, those with gating mutations and other mutations. And this is what we're trying to do, because if you think about what that moonshot is, it's to get that CFTR activity up above that threshold. That's our goal. We have a lot of different approaches to increasing CFTR activity, and I'm going to start from perhaps the easiest approach to that which is more difficult. And we can try to increase the opening of CFTR channels, and we do that with potentiators, or we can look at strategies of trying to prolong the presence of CFTR in the apical membrane. We can try to facilitate the processing and the trafficking of protein to get it to the cell surface, much like we do with our correctors and our next generation correctors. And then there are strategies working at trying to increase the amount of immature protein. This is what would be the target of gene therapy, or editing of DNA or messenger RNA, read through premature stop codons like atalurin, or new amplifiers. A little bit harder, but those are the targets that we're going to be focusing on. So why should we feel that we're any closer to the moon? Well, the success of ivacaftor gives us great hope that we're on target. And what you see here is the marked reduction in the sweat chloride with the addition of ivacaftor, which then resulted in a remarkable improvement in lung function. So when we think about how that fits onto our model of CFTR activity, the patients that have G551D mutations generally have a sweat chloride of about 100 millimoles per liter. When you look at the studies, what you can see here, I've now changed the y-axis to represent time, but you see that marked reduction in the sweat chloride that persisted over time. That is also associated with an increase in CFTR activity in those patients with gating mutations. And so with ivacaftor, we can now see that we've increased the CFTR activity above that threshold, and that was our goal. Even better, this is a long-lasting effect, because it's not merely just increasing the lung function in the short term, but we now have information that looks at the rate of decline of lung function, and this is truly disease-modifying. So when you compare the patients who are on G551D to those that would be a similar severity of disease, you can see that there is a change in the rate of decline of lung function. And when you look at that that reduction is about twofold. Now that may not seem like a big number, but I want you to think of that the way you think about compound interest, that is a bigger and bigger effect over time. What about targeting the homozygotes with our lumacaftor, ivacaftor? Similarly, these patients have a sweat chloride of around 100, and this afternoon Steve Rowe will present the results of the prospect study data. And what they have demonstrated now is that there is also an improvement in sweat chloride, perhaps not as robust, but actually these findings are more impressive than were seen in the original clinical trial. And so when we look at that effect, again, it's not as impressive as what we see with ivacaftor alone for the gating mutations, but it's still a measurable improvement. And also this afternoon, or yesterday, Mike Constant presented the results of the long-term effect of lumacaftor, ivacaftor in homozygous patients. And what you see here are the original results of the traffic and transport trials, which see an increase in lung function in those patients. Now again, it's not the home run that we saw with ivacaftor, but it's real and it's important. And what was seen in the progress study, which is looking at the long-term effects, is first, the placebo patients also realized that benefit. And even though there looks like there may be some attenuation of response, 2 years after starting, these patients have lung function that's better than what they started with. And also looking at the rate of decline of lung function, much like we saw with the ivacaftor in the G551D patients, there is a change in the rate of decline of lung function that will result in lasting benefit for these patients. The next generation molecules is looking at how we can take that a step further. How can we improve further on our delta F508 patients? And so this was shown in yesterday's plenary, and what you see here is our comparison to the effect that we get with ivacaftor for G551D. So if we don't see the same robust response with lumacaftor or ivacaftor in either the homozygous or the heterozygous, when you look at the data, when you add a second generation corrector, the results are really astounding. You can see a marked improvement, even better than we see with the ivacaftor in the homozygous patients, and treatment of the potential heterozygous patients, much like we see with our Kalydeco effect in the G551D patients. And this is important because when I look at the other mutations that we have there, 80% of those patients are heterozygotes, which means we would now have a therapy that we can offer those patients. So what are our goals? Our goals, how we're going to define that moonshot, is we want better drugs. We want drugs that have greater benefits, that have a greater impact on CFTR activity. We'd like it to be a systemic effect. I'm not talking about the other organs, but that is really what we'd like to see. We want to treat all patients, all mutations, and we want to treat younger patients, those with earlier stage of disease, to try to prevent those sequelae of long-term complications of cystic fibrosis. And so when we try to put that together, we're looking now at the genotype grouping, looking at age, and looking at the impact on CFTR activity. You can see what the initial results are with ivacaftor and with the lumacaftor ivacaftor. We have now increased the number of patients that we can treat by going to younger ages with the ivacaftor. Just recently, we got the approval to go to younger ages with lumacaftor, ivacaftor, but we want more. We want to go younger, and we want to get everybody, and so this is our goal. This is the moonshot. You also have heard about the pipeline. We have a lot of drugs that are entering human trials, a lot of different approaches here looking at amplifiers, potentiators, correctors, GSNOR inhibitors, read-through agents. These have all been entering into human trials, and there's some in phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. You hear Mike talk about 50 trials. It's not just these. We can't forget about the other types of studies that we're doing, looking at other aspects of this. So we have a number of studies which are up and running, looking at treating infection. We have a bunch of studies that are addressing inflammation. We have several studies that are addressing obstruction. And don't forget the STOP2 trial. And there are other studies that we are enrolling patients. So all I can say is this is just frankly breathtaking. We are that close to the moon. But I want to have time for a reality check here. So we have a lot of studies that are ongoing. We have a lot of studies that we're about to start. This is going to take a lot of work. It's going to need to recruit a large number of patients. And if I put a little more perspective on it, if we were to rely completely on the TDN sites, This is a figure that demonstrates all of the TDN sites and the proportion of patients at their centers that participate in research. And if we need to just rely on these sites to recruit those patients, we're going to have to ask these sites to amp it up a bit. And when I say amp it up, I'm saying we're going to have to go spinal tap and turn that amp up to 11. And why 11? Because when you do a little math, what you find is that if these sites all enrolled 11% of the patients at their centers, we could do that. But that's a big hurdle. That is going to be a big hurdle. How are we going to get this done? Well, the answer is teamwork. And what I'd like to do is spend a little time acknowledging all the members of these teams that are going to be working together. And I'm going to start with the basic scientists. They've already been doing the work. They discovered the pathways, they discovered the products, they discovered the potential to turn those into medications that might work in our patients. They've done the preliminary work to support human trials, and they're continuing to work to discover new and even better agents. Well, we have the clinical research teams. They are the ones that will recruit the patients and implement the trials, but they do more. They actually help with the design of trials, the feasibility of doing those trials, helping investigative teams figure out which vendors to use. There are a lot of great teams out there, and I'm showing my team up here. I'm very proud of this team. They work very hard to recruit these patients. But I don't want to forget the others at your sites that are very important in getting these things done. That's your IRBs, that's your grants and contracts, that's the rest of the infrastructure to get these done. Very important are the clinical care teams, because they're the ones that are taking care of the patients. They're the ones who can instill the confidence in these patients to do these trials. They can help participate in the recruitment. And very key, they have to work with the research teams to provide optimal care, because things will happen and they need to have someone addressing the clinical parts. But there are also those clinical care teams that are at sites that are not participating in those trials, and they have the opportunity to recruit those patients and refer them to other sites. A lot of great teams out there. Again, I'm showing you my team. I'm very proud of our adult and pediatric care teams. They work very, very hard. Can't forget the patients and families, because remember, no subjects, no data, no answer. Now, I just want to pause for a moment to just reflect on how valuable their participation is, because I'm going to make an assumption that I think is pretty safe, and that is that every person in this room at some time in their life has taken a medication. Whether it's over the counter or a prescription, they're taking a medication that went through a trial. Somebody volunteered to participate in the development of that drug. So we owe a tremendous gratitude to all of those persons who have ever participated in a clinical trial. But I want to bring up one more important issue about participation in clinical trials, and that is, could there be some benefit of participating in clinical trials? Well, actually there is. We know the adherence rates in trials. They're always very good. You see, the reported adherence to a study medication generally is in 80 to 90%. Very, very good. But we also know from trials that patients who participate in research also become adherent to their other therapies. And the reference I'm giving you here is from a hypertension study. And what they demonstrated is that while those patients were in the study, they were adherent to their other medications, not just the study drug, but after completion of the study, their adherence rates dropped back to previous levels. So I challenge you, if you're out there thinking about a QI project and you want to focus on adherence, maybe you might want to think about improving enrollment in trials, and that might actually result in greater adherence for those patients. The TDN does an awful lot of work. They function as a coordinating center, which provides very valuable insights in terms of development of studies and feasibility. In many cases, they're actually managing those trials, and I've had the privilege of working with this group, and it has been a lot of fun. They are very, very talented. There are also committees that work with the TDN that, for example, the Protocol Review Committee that helps analyze the studies, look at feasibility, give a priority score to tell us which ones might be the most important for our patients, but also focus on the dissemination of those results. It's not just about doing the study. We've got to get that out and get people following those recommendations, using those therapies. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I've given only a brief list of the activities that they participate in because it's very, very long, but I wanted to focus on just a couple of those. Obviously, they're supporting the network. They are providing financial support and guidance for us to have the infrastructure to do these clinical trials. Recently, they contributed to the ARC Awards to increase the number of research coordinators working on these trials, and they've created the website, which you've seen, to help people identify studies that might be right for them. We can't forget the regulatory agencies. They have a job of performing the final review and making a decision of whether to approve that medication. It is a very, very difficult job, and in my recent years working with them, I have developed a tremendous respect for them. They have it very hard because no one's ever happy. It either takes too long, or how could you possibly let that drug get out there? They have a very, very difficult job. But they do far more than just do the final review and determination. They are a highly collaborative group. And I've had the pleasure of working with them in a number of instances in which they are helping to work on study design, provide the guidance on what studies need to be done and how they should be done. But also, they need our help. They need to know what's important, what is the right endpoint, how would they know so they can use that determination. And I found working with them to be a great pleasure. Frustrating, but a great pleasure. And then we have to count on industry. They bring enormous resources to the investigation, and it's not just financial. They bring a large amount of capital, but they bring a lot of technical expertise in the discovery, the manufacturing, the development of both preclinical and clinical research. But they also bring a high degree of rigor. These studies are tight, and they have to be because they have to stand up to regulatory guidance. And so they bring tremendous resources to that effort. So how does this work? These are all the pieces of the puzzle that have to come together, and through this, working together, then we're going to get close, and that moon's getting closer. So there's going to be some stumbles, and you have to know that. If you do this long enough, it's not always easy and successful. Not all of these compounds are going to make it to market. There might be issues of lack of efficacy or other adverse events, and what we have to do is pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and move on to the next trial. The only failure is if we don't enroll. I've been asked about the STOP study. What do you do if you fail? We cannot fail unless we don't enroll the study, because then we don't answer the question. So it's terribly important that we achieve our enrollment. So our goal is to get to the moon. But it's not just to get one person to the moon, it's to get everyone on the moon. And we want to keep them there for the rest of their lives. Now, you may not be able to tell by the stance that you see, and I know you can't read the name tag on that uniform, but I just want to acknowledge the person who made a big contribution to getting us to this point, and that's Bob Bell. But now I've presented things as if this was just a U.S. effort, that it was all dependent upon the TDN or the U.S. sites to do this, but that is not the case. This is a global effort. We are not alone. And so what I'd like to do now is invite Kris up to talk about what's happening outside of the U.S. Thank you.
When you do not see the moon here in America, we see it in Europe or in Oceania, and we want to help you to get the patients to the moon, all of them. So I'm very thankful to be allowed to report on some of the activities and clinical trials going on in these parts of the world. Let's first go to Australia and New Zealand. Together, almost 4,000 patients with cystic fibrosis. And look at what a diversity, not only in faces, but also in CFTR mutations. Now, boosting clinical trials in this vast country is not so easy. But CF Australia, the parent organization, has put a huge effort in informing patients about trials, providing access to trials, and building capacity. And this new website that they're so proud of and that they could develop in partnership with CFF, CF Lives Matters, really provides patients to information on every clinical trial going on anywhere in the world, and also has very much patient-friendly information on clinical trials. But they'll use other platforms, newsletters, research roadshow, community consultation, CF Can, a new patient advocacy network, collaboration with other nonprofits, streamline all discussions on clinical trials into a digital meeting place that will be called Consumer Connect, and bring the physicians together, really to build capacity and have more trials going. Now, the research focus in Australia has for a long time been the young child with cystic fibrosis. They were the first to point out that although young children have a normal lung function, they already do have structural lung disease at a very young age. So the Combat CF study will really answer a very important question. Can azithromycin, started from infancy, prevent bronchiectasis? And along the same line of better prevention, we know that diabetes has a great impact on the course of CF. So if you start insulin even earlier, when the OGTT is abnormal but not reaching diabetic diagnosis, can you then improve weight gain and lung function? Answers for that trial already next year. But let's now move to Europe. In our registry, we have information about patients in 30 different countries, almost 40,000 patients, and 1,300 different CFTR mutations. But these pockets of higher prevalence of specific mutations in specific areas really provide research opportunity. Also, as the fact that less correctors are already used in Europe will make it easier to do clinical trials with new modulators. We have organized ourselves in a European Clinical Trials Network, and that was quite an effort. We have different languages, different nationalities, but now we are growing fast, and we're present in 15 countries, 43 sites, 18,000 patients altogether. How did we become successful so quickly? Well, we were allowed to copy the TDN model, and we got access to all your resources. We learned to work together and to share responsibilities. We have a very small but superb administrative core team. We stay in close collaboration with the CFF-TDN, and we owe great thanks to Bob Bell, Preston Campbell, Mike Boyle, George Bogart, Bonnie Ramsey, and the entire TDN team. Our success is really also your success. And we get great support from the CF Europe parent organization. What do we call success? Well, we produce high-quality data via training and standardization, learned from the TDN. We finish trials on target. And you see here, we're a young network, but the number of active studies per month rises astronomically. So far, we've included 1,500 subjects in clinical trials, but that also means that very many have not yet participated in a clinical trial. So we want to empower our patients and parents even more in clinical trial review, forming young patient groups, and hopefully make room for investigator-initiated clinical trials. We thank everybody we've worked with so far. Let's now highlight a couple of trials with specific European sponsors. Algae Pharma has quite an exciting compound, alginate oligosaccharide derived from brown algae, and that affects CF mucus, makes it thinner. Pseudomonas biofilm breaks it down and potentiates the efficacy of antibiotics. A clinical trial has just been completed, and that will answer the question whether oligo-G inhaled by the patients will improve lung function in adults with chronic Pseudomonas infection. Galapagos, Belgian company, now in partnership with AbbVie, has a corrector potentiator pipeline. We've explored in a pilot trial the safety and efficacy on sweat chloride in the most common class 3 mutation in Belgium and the Netherlands. Now, the compound seems to be well tolerated, and it does decrease sweat chloride. The study in G501D patients is ongoing. What's our further ambition? Logically, building capacity with the help of investigators and patients. New recruitments of research coordinators via major financial support from CFF is therefore enormously appreciated. We want to partner with CF Europe towards a global research agenda and start Europe-wide investigator-initiated trial, but we also want to hear more of the patients' voices. It really is their future. Our dream is also to help every single patient with CF to the moon. And with 1,300 different CFTR mutations in our registry, that's a big job. A growing pipeline of compounds is there, and we want to work towards precision medicine. Which treatment will help me with my rare genotype? And later on, why not, if we have choices, which treatment is best for me with my F508del homozygosity? Now, we think we have in Europe a good biomarker that can help us in that quest, organoids, because it can predict treatment response. What are organoids? Well, they're grown from rectum suction biopsies, painless, no anesthesia needed. And rectum suction biopsies contain a lot of stem cells, and given the right conditioning media, these can grow into mini guts. When you're healthy, your organoids are round, they have a lumen, and they swell further when CFTR is activated. When your CFTR doesn't function, your organoids do not have a lumen, and they do not swell when CFTR is activated. But you can measure the rescue of CFTR function when organoids of a person without CFTR function are incubated with specific compounds. As you see here, the example of a class 3 mutation in the presence of ivacaftor. So what's then our plan forward? Well, this technique was developed by a great team, collaboration in Holland. Basic science team led by Chef Beekman, clinical team led by Kors van der End, and the patient organization. We will start small with a couple of sites and make sure we really prove reproducibility between labs, and then roll it out over Europe and beyond. We will involve the patients and the patient organizations. They need to know who their mutations are, what their mutations are, and which treatment will improve CFTR function for them. We need to talk to the regulators to make sure we find a path to drug licensing via standardized clinical trials in responsive patients. And we will want to build further on the ex vivo, in vivo correlation with this technique. Pharma companies, we want to talk to them because they also need to be convinced that we must find the best possible treatment for every single patient. Let's now highlight some other important trials. CF matters. Does lung function recover better after microbiome-determined antibiotic therapy than after standard antimicrobial therapy? We'll know soon. Activate CF. Thus, 3 hours of intensive exercise per week during 1 year improve your FEV1. We need some patients in this trial. Not enrolling is no success, so if interested, please contact Helge Hegenstreit. And finally, a research sample from the agenda of UK, Torpedo CF, great name, is IV therapy for Pseudomonas eradication superior to oral plus inhaled? Answer will be known soon. CF START. In UK, anti-staph prophylaxis is routine in young children. Well, are we certain that this oral anti-staph prophylaxis from infancy will not speed up Pseudomonas acquisition? Answer awaited via the registry. UK Gene Therapy Consortium will continue with a Wave 2 vector, hopefully with better efficacy. And then let's turn back to the patient. The UK CF Trust Clinical Trial Accelerator Program, again, increase capacity for clinical trials, bring equity, make a network of trial coordinators, make better use of the CF registry, and inform and involve people with cystic fibrosis. I cannot phrase it better than with the words of Olli Rayner, one of the main drivers behind this entire project. And he says, when a Formula One team designs and tests a new car, they need lots of input from their drivers. When it comes to designing and testing new CF treatments, we are the drivers and we need to speak up. So America, Australia, Europe and beyond, we need all parties on board. Patients who embrace their research as their ticket to the future, patients who voice their priorities for research, growing research networks, really a global participation to advance as fast as possible. But the most important partner in this entire program, the real stars of the program, are the patients themselves. So I hand over to Patty Boeck to go further on that item.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We've heard today loud and clear, CF research is an international effort. Scientists, physicians, nurses, researchers, and countless other team members have made this effort not only their career path, but their mission. We can never forget, though, this all started many years ago with a group of patients and parents who would not accept things the way they were. It is the CF community's commitment and tenacity that has fueled all this from the very beginning. They've helped raise the funds. They've communicated the importance. They've demanded better outcomes. And they've enrolled in clinical trials and shown up for study visits, and they have moved science forward. Please help me welcome our CF community panel. Yay. They'll wave as I answer. Well, they have their names in front of them. Kristen Dunn worked for years and traveled the world as a financial analyst and is actively involved in the CF community. Kristen was the first CF adult member to serve on the NACFC Program Planning Committee, has helped with fundraising, has participated in numerous foundation initiatives, and currently serves on the CFF Adult Advisory Council. Kristen lives with her husband and 2 cats in New Jersey. Welcome, Kristen. Great to have you. So I should tell you, I have a little screen here so I can see them from right here. Elizabeth Bishop is the single mother of 4 children and lives in southern Missouri. She is the youth librarian at her local library and is taking classes to working towards a degree in nursing. Elizabeth, yay! Great career choice, Elizabeth. Elizabeth's 11-year-old twins, Grace and Cody, have cystic fibrosis. And then Brandon Earhart. Brandon works for Blue Cross and Blue Shield and is a volunteer baseball coach. In his spare time, he volunteers with friends and family of cystic fibrosis in Grand Rapids to help raise funds for local families in need. He and his wife just celebrated their 1-year wedding anniversary, so congratulations, Brandon. Great to have you. Yay. I think you may have noticed there are 2 things these panel members share in common. These are very busy people, and they've all participated in CF clinical trials. In total, they've participated in over 15 clinical trials. So thank you for coming to the meeting today. When it comes to participating in CF clinical trials, you are clearly the experts, and we want to learn and hear from you. We'll start off with our first question, and Brandon will start it. Why is it important that everyone have the opportunity to participate in clinical trials?
Hey, Patty. Hey, everybody. Clinical trials from a personal perspective, there's there's two really main benefits that I found, and the first is a personal benefit, and I really resonated when I think it was Dr. Flume talked about adherence. And so from a personal perspective, when you're going through those trials and you're having access to study drug for the first time really and before anybody else, there's that aspect of it too. But when you're under the microscope, so to speak, you really take the time to own up to your condition. And you know, when you're building up those relationships with your care team, I know mine's there today, but you're building those relationships and you're getting to know one another, and you build this this bond and this connection. And so from that perspective, it makes study visits more productive. It makes each and every ongoing clinic visit more productive. So there's so much personal benefit to participating in these clinical studies. And then the other benefit really is more of a broad community benefit. You know, we talk about adding tomorrows at the foundation, and we're to a point now where there have been a lot of tomorrows added. And you know, we're now starting to talk about adults with CF, which 20 years ago was never even a concept. And so it takes patience to push this forward and participate in all of these studies that all of you clinicians and physicians and doctors across the world are putting together. And so, yeah.
I agree with everything that Brandon said. And I might be stating the obvious here, but clinical trials are not always fun. They can involve blood draws, long visits, and sometimes you wind up with placebo. But I recently spoke with a mom of a child who goes to a fairly large CF center that does not participate in many, if any, clinical trials, at least that she was aware of. And she was so eager for information about what was going on and what my experience was, and really felt like her daughter was missing out. And that made me feel sad because at my center, they are constantly trying to bring us new trials, and there's a lot of discussion and enthusiasm around research. And that really helps bring hope and inspiration to our clinic visits and also to our monotonous routines back at home. So I think it's important that everyone have the opportunity to participate, or at least learn about, even if that's just being referred to the CFF Clinical Trial Tools website, because it seems incomplete to have a care center visit without any mention of research.
Yay, I want to clap on that. Man, Elizabeth.
In following what Kristen and Brandon said, I totally agree with both of them. Our experience when the children were first diagnosed is they felt completely helpless. I did as a parent, and how do I fight something and protect my children when you can't see CF? The kids look healthy when they're not in the hospital. They look perfectly fine. I think participating in the trials has given them some power back. It gives them some say over what's going to happen to them because they've been through so much. My twins don't want to see another child go through what they've gone through. They don't want to see other children with pumps and chest tubes and having to carry around all the PICC lines and medications. So they really do enjoy participating in the trials and the clinic visits. It really gives them a way to do something about their illness and feel empowered.
Thank you so much. Every year during this session, we hear about advances being made in CF clinical research. Scientists and clinicians share data from trials and talk about what this could mean for the future of CF care. Can you help put this in perspective? As people living with this disease day in and day out, what do these advancements mean to you? And we'll start with Kristen.
Sure. I know clinics can be busy, extremely, and long, sometimes for us too. And talking about research might not seem like a priority because you might think it doesn't affect our daily lives today. But knowledge about research is so important to us, whether or not we're eligible for the specific trials at our centers, because as adults with CF, we are making big and difficult decisions about our futures every day. A few years ago, I made the difficult decision to stop working due to my health declining. It was arguably one of the most difficult decisions I've ever made, and one that my care team coached me through extensively and over several years. But it gave me a lot of hope. It gave me a lot of comfort and helped ease that anxiety to know that maybe with these new drugs coming out, I could return to work one day. Or maybe I could participate in more clinical trials with my additional time. That's just one example, but a 22-year-old starting their first job might be making the decision whether or not to invest in a 401k. Other adults are deciding whether to invest in postgraduate education or take out a mortgage or start a family. And those decisions could look a lot different if they knew about the record number of clinical trials currently underway, or if they knew nothing. So obviously current research is no guarantee, but it can really, really impact those decisions that we're facing today.
Right, right. Elizabeth?
We've had the same experience as Kristen, except with the aspect of my children. I've watched my children go from coding in a medical field in the hospital to playing sports and doing cross country, playing basketball. They went from the NICU to that by taking the ivacaftor, the Clydeco, and we were able to start that through an actual study visit. So these trials do a lot of good things, and I think that a lot of people will participate. Don't be afraid to ask the participants to do the hard things, to take care of all of the records and do all the medication. They'll be willing to do it once they've seen the bad effects of CF turn into the positive aspects of CF, and that there is a way to live productively and happily with CF.
That's great. Brandon?
What a time to be alive, Patty.
Yeah.
There's just so much cool advancements in CF research. And, you know, I grew up with Pulmozyme, and to even think that 20 years or so ago that wasn't around, and what an impact that has made on the CF community. And to think that we are just around the corner from the next Pulmozyme. You know, maybe it's ivacaftor and lumacaftor or some other, you know, trial that's in process right now. We just don't know. And, you know, as Kristen said, there is now this idea of being an adult with cystic fibrosis. And who thought having a mortgage could be so exciting? But that's a reality.
Woo! He's in debt.
That's a... But that's a reality, and you know, I'm so grateful for my center, who has empowered me to learn about these trials, and you know, it just, knowledge is power these days, and I think as patients, as we become more in control, so to speak, and as we become more involved in the decision-making process, you know, we want to know about these things, and that's why tools like the clinical trial research tool are so crucial to getting that type of enrollment in these trials. And so, yeah, I think that with all of us having skin in the game, as you've mentioned before, Patty, to come together in such a unique fashion to push this forward. I think it was the Mattingly Award recipient, right, who said that it's the people in this organization that drive us each and every day. And, you know, we feel that. We feel that as patients, and we feel that with our clinical team.
Well, Brandon, Kristen, and Elizabeth, we're going to wrap it up with one final statement from each of you. You're sitting in a room with about 4,600 of your closest friends. We love you guys. You have helped us so much hear about research from the other side, but I wondered if you would just share with us one closing thought before we end Plenary 2, and we'll start with you, Kristen.
Sure. I have had one negative experience with a clinical trial, but it wasn't for me. It was for my mom in oncology. And it made me realize, just like what Brandon just said, it's the people. It made me realize what a unique community we have here with CF. And when I start a new clinical trial drug, I feel humbled and honored and really excited to start something new. And my care team and my research team are really excited too. So I just really hope that that energy exists all the way back to the researchers in the lab and to every step along the way, because as adults with CF, we are truly counting on each and every one of you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Brandon?
Yeah, I just, I want to congratulate everybody on the success that we've had, and from a patient's perspective and with our clinical team, just a giant thank you. And we are this close to the moon, and so just as we take our next steps, I challenge you to just think of us patients not only as subjects but as who we are. Think of Kristen; she's better looking than I am, but we're people, and we're all in this together, and we're just so excited to see what happens next.
That's great. Thank you, Brandon. And Elizabeth?
I understand from the plenary today that our goal is to get everyone to the moon. We want to get all of the patients on the moon and live as full of a life as possible. But I want you all to know that we realize and appreciate the amount of time that you all are all putting in to finding a cure and advancements in medication. We really do appreciate that. As a parent, the first thing that came to my mind when my children were diagnosed is time. You have a whole new concept of time. Days become more important, holidays become more important, because that time at first can be limited. Now with the Kalydeco and the ivacaftor, my children could live to be 70, 80 as long as they take care of themselves. And that's all due to research and coordinators there, and we appreciate you all so much. We're behind you and pulling for you, and we appreciate you every day.
Oh my, we love you guys. So we just end Plenary 2. It takes everyone, it takes a planet to cure a wicked disease, and all hands are on deck, and we're getting her done. And you've heard from the patients, so nothing but forward from here on. And we're just going to end with standing up and applauding you guys. Thank you so much.